I can't believe it's been 10 years. I started as executive director in March of 2015. At the time, we were called the East European Missions Network, or EEMN. And since then, we have traveled countless miles and have witnessed and celebrated countless milestones that have made Spiritual Orphans Network what it is today, and that's by God's glory. I have an app that keeps track of the travel that we've done, and according to the app, we've made over 107 trips. We've traveled over 1,100 days or 162 weeks, and flown over 500,000 miles on over 500 airplanes. We've driven about 100,000 miles in 118 cars. And then, of course, there are the countless taxis and trains and Ubers and subways and ferries and whatever mode of transportation. We've been to 30 different countries and visited over 400 villages, towns, and cities. But most importantly are the connections that have been made. Thousands and thousands of souls that have been connected to the global family of Christ. And that's what we're about at Spiritual Orphans Network. When I came on board as executive director, we really worked on trying to improve our name recognition so that more and more people knew how they could connect to what we're doing. And so we really focused on bringing where the organization had been to a new level of recognition through social media and specific mailings, and even getting things like the look and our cards where everybody was giving out the same type of cards so that there was that recognition. And of course, we went beyond that, and I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm really excited, but what led to what became Spiritual Orphans Network was really by God's leading. We needed to restructure. And so after a couple of years of meeting everyone that we knew in ministry overseas, and so many people that support us and come alongside of us and partner with us here in North America, we began to get a really great larger picture for what needed to be done. One of the things of which I'm most proud is that in summer of 2016, we were asked to try an experimental teen camp in Slovakia. It was only 3 days, just to see if we could move from that English Bible camp model that was really for younger children to engage youth in meatier curriculum, more like a confirmation curriculum, and it worked really well. So in 2017, in that summer, we hosted our very first teen life and adventure camp, and by God's grace, it was automatically an international camp. We had students from Slovakia, from Czech Republic, from Germany, and we had a student from Belarus at the time, as well as Americans. And it was just a joyful endeavor. Of course, that fall, my wife, Angela Breitenbach, joined us as our Director of Operations and Youth Education. And then the following autumn of 2017, or rather 2018, Mike Wind joined us as Development Director and Director of Adult Education. A lot had happened in between those times. We hosted our first international discipleship conference in Latvia in 2016, and that brought pastors from, I think, 5 or 6 different nations, from everywhere from Albania to, of course, Latvia, Estonia, Belarus. I think we had somebody from Finland. So pastors from all over that came together to learn together. And that really started an incredible sense of community for pastors that had really felt isolated in their own context of ministry. And then in 2019, in that September, our board, Sun Board, made a really incredible decision. And at that time, it was the EEMN board, but they decided go big or go home. And we were instructed to pursue recasting the vision for the ministry that God had placed for us and rebranding. And it goes well beyond choosing a new logo and a new name, but really, how do we craft our story? How do we get people excited about what we're doing? And so in October of 2019, we began pursuing the process of moving from EEMN to SUN, or Spiritual Orphans Network. And it was a big endeavor. We actually hired one company that didn't quite work, and so we hired another company to walk us through the process and also to rebuild the website. The really incredible thing is that this entire rebrand, and it was not inexpensive, was paid for entirely out of the pockets of board members and staff members of Sun Network. None of the monies that were given for a ministry were used for that rebrand. And then 2020 came. Mike Wind and I returned from Lviv, Ukraine, from hosting another adult ministries conference on March 9th of 2020. Of course, on March 11th, that shall be infamously known as when the world shut down because of COVID. And of course, that changed a lot. But by God's grace, Sun grew tremendously during this period of innovation where we were forced to rethink how to engage people in ministry. And so a couple of the highlights. First and foremost, we were working on that name rebrand, and so we officially and legally became Spiritual Orphans Network in April of 2020. But on May 15th, that's when we debuted Spiritual Orphans Network to the world. And that was through a live Facebook event, being forced to use the internet to connect with people because we were still isolated as a society because of COVID. As a result, we also hosted our very first Sun live event, a fundraising event online in August of 2020. And that became a success, and it became an annual event that has really served us well. And we zoom up to April of 2021, and Pastor Scott and Lena Yant were living in Ukraine and serving in Ukraine, and they came on board with Sun Network, and we began that relationship for their ministry in Ukraine. And in June of 2021, we began initial conversations about this idea of building schools, brick and mortar schools elsewhere, and specifically in places like Slovakia and also Albania. And it was in June of 2021 that my wife Angela and I sat down with then the advisor to the president of Albania for Foreign Affairs, Genci Muchai, and he is a really great friend. He is an ambassador of Albania, but also a believer and an educator. And so that began this whole idea of education. In October of 2021, the Yants moved to becoming full-time missionaries of Sun Network, and it's been a blessing ever since. And in January of 2022, Sun successfully placed their very first student at Banal School in Albuquerque, and that was Fioralba Muda from Albania. Of course, we know what happened on February 24th, 2022, and that changed everything. That's when Russia invaded Ukraine and the war began. And personally, that changed a lot because we'd already committed to having Fioralba join us here in Albuquerque, but because of circumstances and with our deep relationship with the Ras family, we decided that we really like to have Ana Maria and Marta Gras here with us in Albuquerque. So after getting them out to safety from the war, first they lived in Romania and then in Slovakia with our ministry partners in Vokislavko. All three girls, Fioralba, Ana Maria, and Marta, they flew home with Angela and myself in August of 2022. And of course, that gave us a whole new perspective on the world and how people are affected. Scott and Elena, they also had evacuated from the war, but they returned back home to Bilik Cirkva in August of 2022 to begin doing their ministry full-time again to the community. And then something really bizarre happened in March of 2023, after I had taken the then president and international schools director for Manal School on a tour of Slovakia and Albania to look at this idea of building brick and mortar schools. Well, I was asked to consider becoming the vice president of that board for Manal School. And so I did. I accepted the nomination and was elected in May of 2023. 3 days later, the president of Manal School announced his retirement, and it was unexpected. And then someone had the audacity to suggest that I become the interim president and head of school at Manal School. I didn't think it would fly. I didn't think it would happen, but God inspired our board once again to really go big or go home. And they approved me to go on loan to Manal School. And so for the 2023-2024 school year, in addition to working with Sun Network, I was loaned to Manal School to be the head of that school and learned so much because it's an international boarding school. It has over 30 different countries that are represented at the school, a full boarding program, and that's with whom we've really built this education initiative. I finished my term as the president of Manal School in May of 2024. And of course, it was right into our mission season. And our mission season was really incredible. In fact, we saw a palpable shift in the students. There was an even greater hunger for the things of God and this desire to know God, especially in places like Albania, which is culturally Muslim. But the desire to know God in a personal and real way. Students were asking incredible questions. And it inspires us to do more and more as we can, and with our curriculum, and we're continuing to engage with local ministries and empower them to do more. God continued to work through that. And so the other thing that we started, and that was through Mike Wynn's effort, was the Global Mission Fellowship in LCMC, which has brought all of these mission agencies together to spotlight what they're doing and to empower people to understand how they can engage in global missions. They don't have to do it themselves. They don't need to assemble teams, but they can partner with our mission agencies to really affect change in the world. And then we have been blessed to announce the addition of Denise and Ayla Shalari as indigenous full-time missionaries serving in Albania. And so they are our newest full-time missionaries, and they're also global workers of the North American Lutheran Church, or NALC. And in December of this last year, in 2024, we hosted our 5th annual Sun live online fundraising event, and we were able to raise almost $100,000. But speaking of money, with the Ukraine war, we were asked to start a Ukraine Relief Fund. And we started that just a few days after the Russian invasion back in 2022. Within 2 months, over $600,000 have been given. Today, in 2025, it's well over $1 million. And much of that has been distributed for direct aid. And it's always to trusted ministry partners who are fully accountable and who are the hands, the feet, the voices of the gospel in everything they think, say, and do, all the while speaking to the immediate needs and seeing to the immediate needs of those that they're serving, both within Ukraine, who are internally displaced, as well as our ministry partners working in the surrounding countries who are offering aid, housing, jobs, school, all sorts of help. And so that brings us to today, which is March 1st of 2025, my 10th anniversary with this incredible organization. And we've experienced a lot of losses, not the least of which is what's happening in Ukraine right now. But only 2 days ago, on February 27th, we lost Pastor Enoch Hammer in Estonia. And he was an incredible force of bringing Christianity back to Estonia after the fall of communism. And then just today, this morning, we lost another incredibly gifted gentleman in the gospel, Doug Anderson. And he was the spearhead behind Churches Alive. And we've been partnering with them and that curriculum. We're using a lot of that in what we're doing in our discipleship conferences. And so we're humbled to know that we're among those who have gone before us, and we continue to fight that good fight. And that's what we're planning on doing for decades to come. We know right now that things have changed with the war in Ukraine and questioning what sort of support is available. But we know that the Ukraine Relief Fund is going to continue supporting rebuilding efforts, which is what we're praying for in the next couple of months, and certainly over the next years, if not decades. I'm really grateful and proud to be the executive director of Spiritual Orphans Network. I have no idea what God has in store for the coming years, but you can bet that we will be on our knees praying for discernment of God's will. Thank you for your partnership and for the privilege of being the face of Son. God bless you all.